My dad walked out on us when I was a kid. Now he wants to be in my life after I became successful. I used to wonder what kind of man my father was. Not the version in my faded memories. The one who laughed too loud at his own jokes, who smelled of cigarette smoke and cheap aftershave, who had a presence that could fill a room but never seemed to stay in one for long. No, I wondered about the man after he left. Did he ever think about me? Did he feel guilty? Did he ever stop in the middle of his new life and wonder what became of the son he abandoned? Or had he just moved on? That question used to keep me up at night. But eventually I stopped asking, because I learned something important. Some people aren't worth waiting for. And my father was one of them. He left when I was 7. One day he was there, sitting at the kitchen table, complaining about the bills, the broken TV, how my mother never stopped nagging him. And the next, gone. No note, no warning. Just an empty closet and a silence that stretched through our home like a ghost neither of us could exorcise. I remember the look on my mother's face when she realized he wasn't coming back. The way her shoulders stiffened, her lips pressed into a thin, unyielding line. She didn't cry. At least not in front of me. She just squared her jaw, rolled up her sleeves and did what she had to do. She got a second job, then a third. She came home exhausted, smelling like diner grease and stale coffee, her fingers raw from scrubbing plates. And still, she found time to ask about my homework, to make sure I had enough to eat, to remind me, again and again, that we were going to be okay, even when we weren't. Even when the electricity was shut off, and we had to heat up canned soup over a gas stove. Even when the landlord stopped being patient and started hammering eviction notices onto our front door. Even when the world kept kicking us down, and my father was nowhere to be found. He didn't write. He didn't call. He wasn't there when I got sick and had to be rushed to the hospital. He didn't show up when I graduated at the top of my class, wearing a thrift store suit that my mother had altered by hand because we couldn't afford a new one. He missed every milestone, every struggle, every single moment of my life that mattered. And for a long time I told myself that was fine, because I didn't need him. I had built something without him. Brick by brick, I had clawed my way out of the life he abandoned me to. I got into college, on scholarships, on late nights spent studying while my stomach ached from hunger. I built a career, climbed my way up, fought for everything I had because I refused to let his absence define me. I became successful. And then, one day, just when I had finally buried him in the past where he belonged, he came back. It started with an email. No subject line, just a name I hadn't seen in years, sitting in my inbox like a rotten thing waiting to be opened. I stared at it for a long time, my stomach twisting. And then, against my better judgment, I clicked. Hey kid, I know it's been a long time. I saw your name in the news the other day. Big shot entrepreneur now, huh? Proud of you. Would love to catch up sometime. Call me. Dad, I read it twice, then 3 times. And then I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound that echoed through my empty office. He thought he could just show up? After all these years, after all the silence, after everything, he thought he could waltz back into my life with some half-assed message and pretend like nothing had happened, like he had any right to call me kid? I should have deleted it. I should have ignored him. But some twisted part of me, the part that still held the scars of his abandonment, wanted to know why. Why now? Why me? So, like a fool, I responded, I don't have a father. And I hit send. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought he would take the hint, slink back into whatever hole he had crawled out of. But my father had always been persistent when it benefited him. The emails kept coming. Then the calls. At first, I ignored them. But then, he left a voicemail, and against my better judgment, I listened. Hey, it's me. Look, I know you don't want to hear from me. I get it. I screwed up. But I just want to talk, okay? Just one conversation. That's all I'm asking. You don't have to forgive me. Just give me a chance to explain. Explain. What was there to explain? He left. He stayed gone. The end. And yet, some masochistic part of me needed to hear it from him. Needed to look him in the eye and make him say it. So I agreed to meet. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted to see if he had the guts to tell me the truth. I met him at a diner. Neutral ground. Public. A place where I wouldn't be tempted to scream at him or walk out the moment he started talking. When I arrived, he was already there, and for a second, I didn't recognize him. The man sitting in the booth was older, thinner, his once dark hair streaked with gray. His face was lined, his hands rough, his once proud posture slightly hunched. He looked tired, and I wondered if time had weighed on him the way it had on me. But then he looked up, and when he smiled, that old, familiar charm slipping onto his face like a well-worn mask, I felt nothing but anger. "Hey, kid," he said, like no time had passed. I sat. I didn't say anything. He fidgeted, drumming his fingers against the table. "You look good. Successful. I always knew you'd do great things." I scoffed. "Did you? Because last I checked, you left before I even had a chance." He winced. "I deserve that." "You deserve a lot more than that," I said flatly. "So go ahead. Explain. Tell me why you abandoned us. Tell me why you left Mom to struggle while you disappeared. I'm listening." He exhaled slowly. I was young. I was scared. I wasn't ready to be a father. Neither was Mom, but she didn't leave. His jaw tightened. "I know. And I hate myself for it. I really do. But I was a mess, okay? I had debt. I had no future. I thought I'd just make things worse if I stayed." "So you thought the better option was to do nothing?" I asked. "To just walk away?" He looked down, and I saw it. Not just guilt, but shame. He swallowed hard. "I want to make things right." "Why now?" He hesitated. And in that hesitation I saw the truth. He didn't come back because he missed me. He came back because now I was worth knowing. And that was unforgivable. I stood. "You don't get to come back now," I said. "You don't get to be part of my life just because it's convenient for you." His face fell. "Goodbye, Dad," I said. I should have felt victorious. Walking out of that diner, leaving my father sitting there with the weight of his own failures pressing down on him, should have given me the satisfaction I had craved for years. I should have been relieved, free of the ghost that had haunted me since childhood. But instead, I felt nothing. Not relief, not closure. Just a dull, lingering anger simmering beneath my skin. Because it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to tell him off, to walk away, to let him sit there with his guilt while I went back to my life. I wanted more. I wanted him to feel it, to understand, with every fiber of his being, the kind of damage he had done. I wanted him to know what it was like to be left behind. But I knew that was impossible. Because men like my father, they never truly felt anything unless it directly affected them. And sure enough, the moment I cut him off, the moment I refused to play along with his desperate attempt at rewriting history, the messages started again. This time, they weren't just from him. They were from family. Distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Old aunts and uncles who had never once reached out when my mother and I were struggling, who had been conveniently absent when I needed them the most. Now suddenly they cared. "Give your father a chance. He's trying, isn't he? That has to count for something. Family is family. You only get one father, you know. One father." I read the messages with a bitter laugh, as if I had ever really had one. The first time he showed up at my workplace, I nearly had security escort him out. I had just stepped out of a meeting, my mind still focused on numbers, projections, and client negotiations when I saw him. Standing in the lobby, hands shoved into his pockets, rocking back and forth on his heels like he had every right to be there. The moment our eyes met, he smiled. Like this was normal. Like he hadn't just tracked me down and shown up uninvited. I stopped in my tracks. The receptionist, a woman I barely knew beyond the occasional polite greeting, glanced between us uncertainly. "Sir, do you have an appointment?" she asked, her professional mask slipping just slightly as she sensed the tension. "I'm his father," he said casually. Like that explained everything. Like that meant something. I clenched my jaw. "You shouldn't be here," I said coldly. He frowned, as if the idea of boundaries was some foreign concept. "I just wanted to talk. You didn't give me much of a chance last time." "I gave you 20 years of chances," I shot back. The receptionist let out a quiet oof, barely suppressing a wince. My father exhaled heavily, rubbing a hand over his face. "Look, I get it. You're mad. But you don't understand." "No," I interrupted, voice sharp. "I understand perfectly. You left. You disappeared. And now that I have something to offer, you think you can just stroll back in like nothing happened?" His face darkened. "That's not fair," I scoffed. "Oh, I'm sorry. Was it fair when you walked out on Mom? Was it fair when she worked herself to exhaustion while you were God knows where? Was it fair when you weren't there for anything?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Because he couldn't. "I just need you to listen," he said finally, his voice lower, pleading. And for a moment, just a fleeting second, I almost did. Not because I wanted to, but because the child in me, the one who had spent years waiting for his father to come home, who had longed for answers, still wanted to know, still wanted to believe there was a reason, still wanted to believe that I had mattered at all. But then I saw it, that same mask of his, slipping just slightly, the slight flicker of something in his eyes. And suddenly, I knew. This wasn't about regret. This wasn't about making things right. This was about him. And before he could speak again, before he could launch into whatever carefully crafted sob story he had prepared, I turned to the receptionist. "Call security," I said simply. Her eyes widened, but she nodded. My father's face twisted with shock, then anger. "You're really gonna do this?" he snapped. "To your own father?" "I don't have a father," I said coldly. Security arrived within minutes, and as they escorted him out, as he shouted empty threats over his shoulder, as he finally realized, that he had lost whatever tiny sliver of control he thought he still had over me, I felt it. Relief, not satisfaction, not victory, just relief. But my father was persistent, and he was desperate, because 2 weeks later, I found out exactly why he had come back, and the betrayal ran even deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't guilt that brought him to me. It wasn't regret. It was money. I found out through my mother. She called one evening, her voice unusually hesitant, uncertain in a way that immediately set me on edge. "You need to be careful," she said. "He's been asking around about your finances." I went rigid. "What?" She let out a tired sigh. "He's in trouble, sweetheart. Debt. A lot of it. I don't know the details, but from what I've heard, he owes some bad people a lot of money. And when he found out you were doing well, he thought maybe you'd be his way out." The world tilted. It was so pathetic that I almost laughed. Of course that was why he had come back. Of course it had never been about me. It had never been about missing me. Never about making things right. Never about anything but his own damn survival. He wasn't looking for a relationship. He was looking for a paycheck. And that was the final straw. The next time he called, I answered. "You need to stop," I said, before he could even speak. A pause. Then, carefully. "Stop what?" "Stop calling. Stop showing up. Stop pretending this is anything more than what it is." Silence. Then, with forced casualness, "I just wanted to—" "Don't," I interrupted. "I know why you're here. I know about the debt. I know you thought you could use me to get out of whatever mess you got yourself into. But I'm not your lifeline. I'm not your second chance. I'm not anything to you." "It's not like that," he started. But I could hear the panic creeping into his voice. "It's exactly like that," I snapped. "You're not a father. You never were. You walked out on us, and now I'm returning the favor." He inhaled sharply. "Don't call me again," I said. "Ever." And then I hung up, blocked his number, deleted every message, and just like that, the man who had abandoned me all those years ago, he was gone. I thought that was the end of it, that blocking his number, shutting him out, making it clear he had no place in my life anymore, would be enough. That finally, after years of silence followed by months of manipulation, he would accept defeat. But men like my father didn't accept things. They took. They pushed. They found new ways to worm themselves back in, to rewrite the narrative until they were the victims and you were the one who owed them some. And my father? He wasn't done with me yet. Not by a long shot. It started with the rumors. Whispers among extended family. The kind of people who had never lifted a finger to help my mother and me when we were struggling, but now suddenly had opinions on the way I was treating my father. "He's just trying to make amends. How can you be so cruel? He's your father. Blood is blood." I ignored it. I had spent my whole life learning how to tune out unwanted noise. But then the online posts started. I woke up one morning to a flood of messages. Friends, colleagues, even a few reporters reaching out, all linking me to a Facebook post that had gone viral in certain circles. My father's name was attached to it. The post itself was a masterpiece of manipulation. I know I made mistakes. I know I wasn't perfect, but all I ever wanted was a chance to make things right. And now, my own child, someone I love more than life itself, has turned their back on me, refusing to even speak to me. It breaks my heart every day. I just hope one day they find it in their heart to forgive me, because no matter what, I will always love them. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight, my vision tunneling. The comments were exactly what I expected. Strangers, people who had never met me, who had no idea what kind of man my father really was, poured out sympathy. This is heartbreaking. No parent is perfect. Kids these days are so entitled. You only get one father. I hope your child realizes what they're doing before it's too late. The too late part made me pause. And then I saw it, buried beneath the sea of saccharine condolences, a single line that sent ice through my veins. Stay strong, brother. I know it's been tough since the diagnosis. Diagnosis? My hands tightened around my phone. I hadn't heard anything about a diagnosis. I didn't know if it was real or if it was another tactic, another manipulation designed to make me feel something, to push me back toward him out of obligation. But I also knew I couldn't ignore it. Not yet. Because if there was even a chance that my father was sick, that he was dying, then I needed to decide, once and for all, if that changed anything. I didn't call him. I wasn't that stupid. But I did some digging. It wasn't hard. His life was a mess, a collection of overdue bills, failed relationships, and burned bridges. I found out that, yes, he was in debt, deep in debt. And yes, he had been trying to reach out to anyone who might help him, from distant cousins to former friends. But the diagnosis, that part was real. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Not a death sentence. Not yet, but close. And suddenly, it all made sense. Why he had shown up. Why he had pushed so hard. Why he had refused to accept my rejection. Because he wasn't looking for forgiveness. He was looking for a safety net. He was looking for me. For 2 days, I sat with that knowledge, turning it over in my mind like a blade between my fingers. Did it matter? Did I care? Would I regret shutting him out completely if he was truly dying? The answer came in the form of a memory. I was 8 years old, sick with the flu. My fever so high that my mother had been on the verge of rushing me to the emergency room. I remember lying in bed, weak, shivering, my body aching in ways I didn't understand. And I remember wishing for him, wishing that he would walk through the door, press a cool hand to my forehead, tell me everything would be okay. But he never came. He never called. He never cared. And now, suddenly, when it was his turn to be sick, when he was the one who needed someone to take care of him, now, he wanted me. I made my decision that night. I called my lawyer. I had been smart over the years, too smart to let my success make me careless. My finances were locked down, my assets protected, my will already written despite my age. But now, I wanted proof. I wanted a document that ensured my father would never see a single cent from me. No inheritance. No medical bills covered, no sudden claims that he was entitled to anything I had worked for. Legally, financially, emotionally, he would be nothing to me. By the time the paperwork was signed, I felt lighter. Because now it was truly over. The final time I saw my father, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some emotional last-minute reconciliation where he apologized and I forgave him. It was quiet. A cold clinical hospital room, the smell of disinfectant, the distant beep of machines monitoring his vitals. He was thinner than before. The sickness had taken its toll, turning his face gaunt, his skin pale. When he saw me, his eyes widened, then softened. "You came," he rasped, voice weak. I nodded, sat in the chair beside his bed, looked him in the eyes and said, "I'm not here for you. I just wanted to see for myself that it's over." His breath hitched. No, I interrupted. "No more excuses. No more lies. You made your choices. You left. And now, when you need something, you come crawling back. But I'm not here to save you, Dad. I'm here to tell you that I don't owe you anything." His hands clenched weakly at the sheets. I—" He started again, but he stopped, because he knew. He knew. I stood. "Goodbye, Dad," I said. And this time, I walked away without looking back. I didn't attend his funeral. I didn't send flowers. I didn't acknowledge it at all. Because by the time he died, my father had already been dead to me for years. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the memories crept in, when the what-ifs whispered in my ear. But I never regretted it. Because I had spent my entire life learning one hard truth. Just because someone shares your blood doesn't mean they deserve your love. And I wasn't going to waste another second of my life on a man who had already wasted every chance he'd ever had. I had built my own life. My family cut me off for marrying, outside their culture. Now they want me back after losing everything. I still remember the way my mother's face hardened the moment I told her. The air between us had thickened, her fingers tightening around the edge of the dining table, as though she needed to hold on to something solid before the weight of my words sent her crumbling. My father, seated at the head of the table, barely blinked. His silence was more terrifying than his rage, because it meant he had already made his decision before I had even finished speaking. I had known it would be bad. My family had always been proud of their heritage, their traditions, their way of life passed down through generations like sacred scripture. We were raised to believe that honor was the backbone of our identity, that blood and legacy were the only things that truly mattered. To step outside that, to choose a path not dictated by the expectations placed upon me, was the same as betraying everything they stood for. And yet, I had dared to love. I had fallen for someone whose roots did not intertwine with ours, whose customs and language carried the echoes of a world my family had no desire to understand. To them, it wasn't just a matter of preference. It was a desecration of everything they had built their lives around. The moment I announced that I was marrying Alex, I ceased to exist in their eyes. "You are dead to us," my father had said. His voice was chillingly even, each syllable a nail sealing the coffin of my place in this family. My mother did not weep. My siblings did not plead for them to reconsider. There was no dramatic outburst, no moment of hesitation. Just a quiet, final severing of ties, as if I had never been their child at all. They cut me off in every way possible, financially, emotionally, even socially. Relatives and family friends were warned to stay away, and those who dared to reach out did so in whispers, terrified of being caught offering me even the smallest bit of kindness. My name was wiped from the family records, my photos removed from the house, my existence erased as though I had never been born into their world. It hurt, more than I could have ever imagined. The sting of their rejection was a wound that bled for years, a pain that settled deep in my bones, reminding me of what I had lost. But in their effort to break me, they had unknowingly set me free. I built something beautiful in the ashes of what they destroyed. The years that followed were not easy. There were nights when the loneliness was suffocating, when I found myself instinctively reaching for my phone only to remember there was no one left to call. There were moments of doubt, of fear, of wondering if I had made the right choice, if love was worth the price of an entire family. But then, there was Alex, the person who stood by me when everything else fell apart, the person who wrapped me in warmth when the coldness of my past tried to creep back in. Together, we built a life rich with love and laughter, surrounded by people who chose to be our family, not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. Success came too, not just in love, but in every aspect of my life. I built a career I was proud of, one that would have made my parents swell with pride if only they had been willing to see me for who I was, rather than who they wanted me to be. We bought a home, traveled the world, lived a life that was filled with adventure and passion. And as the years passed, the pain of losing my family dulled into something distant, a scar rather than an open wound. I stopped waiting for them to come around. I stopped hoping they would change. Then, one day, they called. It was an unknown number, one I would have ignored had it not been for the unshakable feeling in my gut. Something told me to answer, though I had no idea why. The voice on the other end was hesitant, unfamiliar at first. But then she said my name, and the years melted away in an instant. My mother. Her voice was thinner than I remembered, the authority that once coded every word now stripped away. She asked me how I had been, as though we were merely estranged cousins catching up after years apart, as though she hadn't been one of the people who had sentenced me to exile without a second thought. I let her talk. Let her build up to what I already knew was coming. And then, finally, the truth. They had lost everything. My father's once thriving business had collapsed under the weight of bad decisions and worse luck. My siblings, once so proud and untouchable, had scattered, their own lives in shambles. A scandal, one they refused to elaborate on, had tainted the family name, leaving them ostracized by the very community they had once used to shun me. They had no money, no standing, no allies. And now, in their time of need, they had thought of me, not because they missed me, not because they regretted what they had done, but because I was their last option. I let the silence stretch between us, savoring the weight of it. I held the power. Once, I would have done anything to hear my mother's voice again, to feel the warmth of family, even if only for a fleeting moment. Once, I would have considered this a second chance, an opportunity to mend what had been broken. But I wasn't that person anymore. I see, I said finally, my voice measured. And what exactly do you want from me? She hesitated. Your father and I, thought that maybe you could help us. Just a little. We wouldn't ask if we had any other choice. It was almost laughable. The same people who had cast me aside like an unwanted burden were now here, voices trembling, hands outstretched, begging for the mercy they had never once shown me. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers against the armrest. Help you, I echoed, as though the concept was foreign to me. You mean financially, of course. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. We wouldn't have reached out if it weren't serious. I cut her off with a chuckle. I'm sure you wouldn't have. Tell me, when exactly did you realize I still existed? Was it before or after you lost everything? Silence. I heard something raw in her voice. Not sorrow, not regret, just desperation. You're our child, she whispered. No matter what happened, we are still your family. My grip tightened on the phone, but my resolve did not waver. Family. The same word they had weaponized against me when it suited them. The same word they had used to justify their cruelty. And now, the same word they were trying to use as a lifeline. I smiled, though they couldn't see it. Let me think about it, I said, my tone laced with something they had never expected to hear from me. Control. I had the upper hand, and I wasn't going to waste it. I let them wait. Days passed without a response. I imagined my mother pacing the house she no longer owned, clutching her phone with trembling fingers, whispering prayers to a God she had invoked countless times when condemning me. I envisioned my father, once the embodiment of untouchable authority, staring at his reflection in a cracked mirror, the weight of his failures sagging in the hollow beneath his eyes. They had spent years pretending I did not exist. Now I granted them a taste of their own cruelty, forcing them to sit in the discomfort of uncertainty. Their calls unanswered, their messages unseen. It was Alex who finally asked, late one evening as we sat beneath the warm glow of our living room, whether I was going to meet them. You don't owe them anything, they reminded me, fingers laced through mine. But I also know you. If you don't face them, it'll linger. And damn it, they were right. I had spent years crafting a life where my family's absence was a mere footnote rather than a gaping wound. But now that they had resurfaced, their presence threatened to unravel everything. The past was no longer a ghost I could ignore. It was knocking at my door, demanding to be acknowledged. And so, against every bitter instinct, I sent a single message. Tomorrow, noon, the old cafe on 5th. One chance. Don't waste it. I received no reply, but I knew they would come. They had no other choice. The cafe was exactly as I remembered. The same worn wooden floors. The scent of freshly ground coffee beans mixed with hints of cinnamon and nostalgia. Once, I had sat at a corner table here, poring over books while my mother lectured me about propriety, about how women from our background did not loiter in places like this, did not sip lattes like Westerners, did not waste hours lost in fiction when reality required discipline. And yet here we were, meeting on neutral ground, in a space they had once deemed beneath them. They arrived 5 minutes early. My mother was the first to step inside, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. There was a brief flicker of hesitation in her gaze, as though she had momentarily forgotten what I looked like. I had changed after all. Gone was the timid child who bowed her head in submission. In my place sat a woman carved from the stone of survival, adorned in success they had sworn I would never achieve without them. My father followed. He had aged. Deep lines marred his once imposing features, his posture slightly hunched, his clothes no longer carrying the silent arrogance of wealth. He hesitated at the threshold, his pride warring with necessity. I did not rise as they approached. They slid into the seats across from me, their movements slow, careful. For a long moment, none of us spoke. It was my mother who finally broke the silence. "You look... well." I took a sip of my coffee, letting the words settle between us. I would not offer them the comfort of politeness, not after everything. My father exhaled sharply, shifting in his seat. "We should not waste time. You know why we are here." I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Do I?" His jaw clenched. My mother reached for his hand beneath the table, a silent plea for patience. I watched the exchange with mild amusement. Once they had been an unshakable force, a monolith of control. Now they were fractured, the cracks in their foundation laid bare. "We need help," my mother admitted finally, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. "The family, the business, everything is gone." I did not respond immediately. Instead, I let the weight of their words settle, let them squirm beneath the unbearable truth that they were now the ones seeking mercy. "How unfortunate," I said at last, my tone devoid of sympathy. Though I must admit I fail to see how that concerns me. My father bristled. "Don't be petty." I arched an eyebrow. "Petty?" A slow smile curved my lips. "You cut me off. You erased me. You made it clear that I was nothing to you. And now, years later, you sit before me, asking for my help, and you expect me to simply forget?" My mother's expression crumbled, but my father, ever the prideful man, only clenched his fists beneath the table. "We made mistakes," my mother whispered, "but you are still our daughter." I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. "No," I said, leaning forward. "I was your daughter, until I loved the wrong person, until I chose a life you did not approve of. Then I was nothing." She flinched, but I pressed on. "For years I grieved a family that never mourned me. I built a life without you, despite every obstacle you placed in my path. And now you come to me, not out of love, not out of regret, but because you have lost everything and you think I am your last salvation." I shook my head. "You did not come to reclaim me as your child. You came because you need something." My father's patience snapped. "Fine," he spat. "You want the truth? Yes. We need help. We need money. You are successful now, and you thought I would be desperate enough for your approval to save you," I finished coldly. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. And then I asked the question that had been lingering in the back of my mind since the moment my mother's voice had echoed through the phone. "If the roles were reversed," I murmured, watching them closely, "if I had lost everything and come crawling back to you, would you have helped me?" Neither of them answered, because we all knew the truth. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. I had already made my decision before I had even arrived. This meeting was not about reconciliation. It was about closure, about facing the ghosts of my past and realizing that they no longer had power over me. "I owe you nothing," I said finally, my voice steady, "and I will give you nothing." My mother inhaled sharply. My father's face darkened with fury. "You would abandon us?" he demanded. "After everything we have done for you?" I tilted my head. "You mean after everything you took from me?" A long silence stretched between us. And then, quietly, my mother spoke. "If you walk away now, we will never reach out again." I met her gaze without hesitation. "That," I said softly, rising from my chair, "is the first promise I actually hope you keep." I turned without another word, without a single glance back, and walked out of the cafe. I left them sitting in that cafe, their faces frozen in a mixture of anger and disbelief, but I knew it wouldn't be the last I heard from them. Pride was a delicate thing, especially for people like my parents, who had spent their entire lives believing they were above pleading, above begging, but desperation was stronger than pride, and I had no illusions that they would let this be the final word. And I was right. Over the next few weeks, the calls came in waves. First from my mother, softer this time, her voice laced with something dangerously close to real sorrow. She did not demand. She did not even try to argue. Instead, she told stories, conjuring memories I had buried deep beneath the weight of their betrayal. "Do you remember when you were little, how you used to follow me around the kitchen, asking to help even when you were too small to reach the counter?" she murmured over the phone one evening. "I would give you a little rolling pin and let you think you were making the dough yourself." I closed my eyes. I did remember. But memory was not enough to rewrite history. Other calls followed, some from my siblings, their voices hesitant, unsure. They had been bystanders in my exile, neither standing up for me nor taking pleasure in my punishment. Now they reached out under the guise of concern. "I don't agree with how things happen," my younger brother admitted one night. "But this is family. No matter what, we're still connected." "Family," I repeated, tasting the word like it was something foreign. They had wielded that word like a weapon against me for years, using it to justify their cruelty, to demand my obedience. And now, they spoke it as if it were a tether, something unbreakable. But I had broken it, and I had no desire to tie it back together. The last call came from my father. He did not waste time with pleasantries. "Enough of this," he snapped. "You've made your point. But we both know you have the means to help. And you will." I almost laughed at the sheer audacity of it. "And why would I do that?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "Because despite everything, we are your blood." I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch between us. I could hear his breathing, hear the underlying frustration beneath his words. This was a man who had never begged for anything in his life. And yet here he was, standing on the last crumbling edge of his dignity, hoping I would extend my hand and pull him back from the abyss. But I wouldn't, because he had been right all those years ago. I was dead to them, and the dead owed nothing to the living. "I am not your daughter," I said, each word a final nail in the coffin of our relationship. "Not anymore." His breath hitched just for a moment, a second of hesitation, a second of realization. Then, with all the venom he could summon, he hissed, "You are a disgrace." I smiled. "You said that last time," I murmured. "And yet, here you are." I hung up before he could say another word. And that was the last time I ever heard his voice. The silence that followed in the wake of my family's collapse was different from the silence I had lived with for years after being disowned. That silence had been filled with grief, with longing, with questions I had never been able to answer. But this was peace. They did not call again. Not my mother, not my father, not my siblings. It was as though they had finally understood that there was nothing left to salvage, that whatever existed between us had been reduced to dust. For months, I waited for the familiar ache to return, for regret to creep into the spaces they had once occupied in my heart. But it never did. Instead, life moved forward. Alex and I expanded our home, filling it with warmth and laughter, with friends who had become family in ways that went deeper than blood. My career flourished, my days were filled with purpose, and the shadow of my past grew fainter with each passing season. One evening, as I stood in the backyard watching the sky bleed into hues of gold and violet, Alex slipped their arms around my waist, resting their chin on my shoulder. "You seem lighter," they murmured. I smiled, tilting my head back against theirs. "I think I finally let them go," I admitted. They pressed a hand to my temple, holding me a little tighter. I felt no weight on my chest, no ghosts whispering in the corners of my mind. My family had cut me off once, and now, finally, I had done the same. Only this time, it was forever.